Okay, welcome back to week 4 of COMP305, and it's lesson 4, part 1. So a couple of administrative things that we have to discuss first before we begin the main lesson today. And again, this is just going to be, these next parts for the next few days are going to be, or a couple days, are going to be really just to build out the rest of our little, our 2D game that we've been doing last week as well. But I also want to do a couple things. I want to mention that tomorrow I'm going to give you your assignment number 2, which is going to be an assignment for a 2D platformer. In case we're going to talk about that a little bit, right? So that's going to be the second piece. So you've done a scroller, then you do a platform. Once you do those 2 things, pretty much you can do almost anything. There's other ones you can do too, but you don't have a lot of time to do everything though. So we have to focus our time on kind of the most popular pieces. So some kind of shooter and a platformer might be a couple good things to do. There might be also another opportunity for us to do something to do with a puzzle game, more from a UI perspective, and we'll talk about that as well. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. But then in the second half of this semester, I want to focus on 3D, right? Because that's going to be our focus. As you can hear from my voice, I'm a little under the weather today. I'm not quite high on drugs, but definitely affected. So bear with me. So one of the things I got to talk about is this whole thing about Varsity Hack. So I know some of you are going to go. So it's just I've got to talk about it from an admin perspective. I know there are, from what Ilya was saying today, there are about 60 people attending. So quite a busy attendance. Varsity Hack, we talked about that last week. So if you haven't signed up yet and you're interested in going, and even if you're in a team, please register on your own. All right, you have to register on your own for you to be part of this whole thing. Again, there are going to be free food and drink, from what I understand, and it's going to start at 9:30 on Saturday, finishing around 5 p.m. on the Sunday with some awards, because there's definitely going to be awards for this one, right? So I also heard that, and if you notice, there's different positions that you can sign up for: developer, designer, a business person, a pitcher. You don't have to be a developer when you sign up, and what they're probably going to do, whether you decide to be in a team or not, is they're probably going to mix you up a little bit, just FYI. Also, from what I'm hearing, U of T Scarborough campus is also going to be in the running for the competition. It won't just be us. So there'll be other people there as well. My thoughts are that maybe what we'll do is have a powwow on, let's say, Friday afternoon for those people who want to take part. What I'll probably do is open up some kind of meeting. I'll try and find a room where we can get together, and we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow or on Wednesday to try and figure out what time works best for everyone. If it doesn't work for you, worst case, I'll broadcast it, right? So that way you can always follow the broadcast and all that kind of stuff. But I want to kind of talk about it just as an aside, because even though it's not part of our curriculum, I think it's a great opportunity, like I mentioned before, for a resume building experience. It's a great opportunity for you to be a pitcher. If you're someone who doesn't feel that you're very strong from a coding perspective, but have great ideas and you're great at presenting, pitcher might be for you. There might be also a business person, if you look for what it says here, a business and management specialist, so like a leader type. The designer obviously is, you know, the person who makes assets and gathers assets together. Maybe has some more of a creative type, and then of course the developer is most of us, right? So there's room for every kind of person in this one, and from what I see, there's no restrictions. It's not like you're restricted for who can come out and who can't, from what I see. But that's the schedule. It looks like that there's going to be a pitch clinic for pitchers only and breakfast. There's going to be a project pitch at around 10. That's what the schedule looks like to be. Project selection and networking. So they're going to actually select the project ideas that kind of win the pitch competition. And then from there, there's going to be a bit of a team building session around 11. And then finally get into it. So around 12 is when we're gonna start really seeing some headway, and then the end of the day happens around 9 p.m. Now, if you notice, there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner supplied for the first day, and a breakfast and lunch for the second day. Which is, you know what? If you're a student and you got to buy or make your own lunch, just that alone should just get you off your butt to get out there, right? Because it costs more money for you to make it than for you to get it for free, right? Minus transportation costs, of course, right? So I think it's a great opportunity for you guys. That's all I can say about it, but more information to come this week. as we kind of coalesce on the Friday. Okay, so I'll kind of send out a note to that effect. Also, I've been hearing from some of you that there's some issues with your projects and people are having difficulty putting things together. So I've got this little poll that I'm going to put up right now. I'm going to make it live in a second. And when I do, the 4 dates are Monday, October the 5th at midnight as an extension. That's the longest I can go, guys. Sunday, October the 4th, Saturday, October the 3rd. This is over the hack as well. And then no change this Friday at midnight. So some people may desire that. So it's anonymous. I want you guys to be to answer this, and we can come together. Whatever the highest is wins. Okay, so whatever you guys decide as a team, I'm gonna either keep it the same or move the date to that other date. Okay, so let me just kick this off, and just to talk about what it does. When we get to this thing, hopefully everyone can see it. You have to text learn to 37607, and then you can say A, B, C, or D. Or the other option is go to the website, pollev.com/learn, and then you can certainly answer that way as well. Okay, so that's we'll see what the majority of you guys want. And since most of you represent the biggest part of the group, that's a good opportunity. So I see Monday. Right. It's okay. It's a live poll, so you're going to see some results pretty much right away. Please don't cheat and use both your computer and your phone. Right, that would be bad. I mean, we want to try and make it as fair for everybody as possible, right? So I don't think there's pretty much any doubt as to what you guys want right now, but you know, I can only put it out there, and so that way there are some people that put it out and say, no, I want to be the same, and some people say, well, no, you know, it's too late. Monday might be too busy, or you know what, I don't want to work on Saturday and Sunday. And all that kind of stuff. So I'll let you guys do a little bit more, and then we'll stop it in a second. All right. I think that's a good amount. Let me just get back to this. Oh, let's not sneak that out. That's you know, we got to make sure that everyone has their say, right? So, I mean, it's pretty apparent to me what everyone wants. Looks like it's going to move to Monday, October the 5th at midnight. Okay, that's just. I mean, I don't think there's. I'm stopping the poll now, but that's the that's what it looks like. What it looks like to me. It looks like Monday, October the 5th at midnight is going to be our time together. Okay, so let me just affect that change right now so that so we don't forget it, because that would be bad, right? Oh. It affects you when you're sick, eh? It affects you. Now, you know what I find, and this is, I'm just going to put it out there to you guys as well. And this is section 2, yeah? So what I find for this kind of stuff, and I have to be honest, is that when I give extensions to this kind of thing, a lot of times you're still not done. And the reason for that is because if it's a difficulty thing, reason for moving is because of challenge level. That's one thing. If it's a workload, it's a totally different thing. Like if you're busy with stuff that's all due on Friday, I understand, right? That makes sense. Moving it on Monday gives you a chance to complete the work, right? But if it's a difficulty thing, moving it to Monday, I'll be honest with you, from Friday may not make as big as a difference as you think, from my experience. Only because either you get it or you don't from this kind of stuff. If you watch the videos and you do the work, and if you've actually done the tutorial, everyone finished the tutorial? Space shooter? How did I know it was going to be not everybody? And the reason for that is if you had finished the tutorial, I think it really goes a long way to help you with this stuff, understanding this piece, right? So I wholeheartedly encourage you to do so. Okay, so the date's moved officially. So that's part of the issue. On that, on kind of the tails of what we're talking about here, let's go to Unity Learn 3D. I'm going to give you another little assignment, like a homework assignment to do. I know some of you haven't done this tutorial anyway, but we're going to get another one coming down the pipe for you guys. If you go to the Unity site, please, with me. I might as well kick off a concept board here too. Why not? And let's just log in. Ha! Board space 57.1 square meters over your limit. Okay, no problem. I will delete the board. It was interesting. We had a bit of a like I said, I've been trying to do these boards over the last little while with everybody because it's a you know what, it's kind of neat from a communication perspective. So I'll kick off a new board. No thanks. Let's see if they actually let me do it now. Here we go. New board, and we'll make this. We'll rename this thing to COMP305 today. Rename. And now we can, if you want to join me, I'm going to share, for those people who've already shared with me on Twitter, I'm going to share it up on Twitter. And there we go. Tweet. Tweet, tweet. All right, so we're going to get to that as well. So I've sent the info on Twitter. You can join me. My board is pretty empty. I'm going to put in a sticky for a second. We're going to put a sticky there that says COMP305. COMP305. We're going to get to this because I want to kind of get your thoughts on stuff. So join me here on concept board. It's a great opportunity for you to share your anonymous kind of feedback and any kind of questions you might have. We'll get back to this in a sec. Especially those people who are watching remotely today, you can also do that. I'll try and be consistent and use it every time. Okay, so I want you guys to learn about platformers next. And I know you guys are working on your offshoot of Space Shooter. And if we go to, if you go to 2D game creation, that's kind of further topics down here, click on 2D game creation. And down below, there are some, is it here or is it the other one? Yeah, it's not here. Hold on. Go back one level. Might be under mini projects. Yes, it's under mini projects. There's a thing for the creating a basic platformer. All right, so there's actually a whole pattern on how to do this thing without you having to do it completely on your own. Some of the stuff you've done for Space Shooter, the one you're making for your 2D shooter right now, will apply to this one, right? So I would, this is your next set of homework. I'm going to be asking you, did you finish the creating a basic platformer game tutorial? Because if you haven't, then when we do our next set of tutorials up on platformer next week, you'll be behind again. So what I'm trying to do is, like I said, trying to give you as much experience as you can with 2D. So we get experience with coding the basic things. Finally, people woke up and are starting to join me on Twitter. Let's see. So any questions around this? Because I know I'm giving you a tutorial and you're like, well, you know, some people said, I'm doing a tutorial on Unity 3D and, you know, I'm also attending your class. Do I need to do this? The answer is yeah. It's an extra bit of information. It's extra work. Think about it as like reading a book. Do we have a book for this course? Absolutely not. There's books I can recommend, but the best stuff is actually here on the Unity site, right? And it gives you some really good examples about how to. There's some patterns that work quite nicely for our purposes, right? We're gonna, you know, we can mix some of these patterns around, and there we go. I've approved a couple more people. We can mess with these patterns just like I'm doing, right, for our little tutorial, so that you get the basics of what's happening here, right? Also, I mean, it may make sense not just to go here physically on the Unity site, but this is a YouTube video, right? So, but that's what they do. They put them up on YouTube. So the best thing is if you can download the YouTube video and actually watch it in something like a VLC media player, you can actually watch it a lot quicker than you would normally be able to watch it. I usually watch things at like 1.5 times speed sometimes. You know, I go blah, 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 it goes really fast. I can hear what they're saying. No, it sounds funny, but you know what? Especially if I'm doing a tutorial, I have no time for it. So if it's an hour, I can cut it down to like, 45 minutes, 40 minutes sometimes. Sometimes I go twice as fast. You know, I zoom through, I listen to people. I zoom through to see the code right away and see what he's done and go back and forth. So it's easier to do that if you download the YouTube video. For mine as well. So if there's some online, there's options to convert most of you should know this already. If I want to download, if I say download video from YouTube, one of them is this en.savefrom.net. It's an online YouTube translator. Basically, it converts your YouTube video into a file you can download, right? So I wholeheartedly encourage you to try this, something like this. There's others as well, little apps you can download for your platform or whatever. This is just a web-based one. Okay, so download it, and then what you can do is, I think I might have it somewhere here. Here it is. Here's the example, right? So I'm playing this one now.
In this training, we're going to be taking a look at.
I can. The great thing is I'm just going to turn this right down so there's no interactivity. But if I start playing this one as an example, I can play the video, and from a playback perspective, I can put it into let's say twice as fast. And as you can see now, instead of me listening to all kinds of stuff, or I can drag it a lot faster to the middle, so I can actually do the video a lot faster than I would normally be able to do it if I was just watching it at normal speed. Some people may need to do that, but the great thing for me is that, and this is just, I have to absorb a great amount of information every week, guys, right? That's my job, right? So I absorb and spit it back out at you as much as I can. And whether I'm doing this, Java, C#, whatever, and if you're a learner, if you're someone who's, who's a college or university student, we have to absorb a whole hell of a lot of information all the time. So I'm just giving you one of my tool tips, if you will, to how to do that, right? And it'll enable you to kind of do it. Now, it may not work for you. Some people are like, and I'll be honest with you, where I picked it up? I had a friend of mine who is vision impaired, and he has a screen reader for, actually going on and, looking at a video or whatever, and or even looking at something on a text. And whenever you hear the screen reader, it's like, open, fine, and it's really, really fast, right? And I'm like, how the hell do you listen to that? He goes, I get used to it, right? So for me, it's like speed reading, right? It's like, but, speed watching. Go through and you watch everything, and then you get what you need, right? And then you stop it where you need to stop it, or move forward and move back. So something that I recommend. So that way it doesn't take you so long to get through it. All right, let's go to concept board here and see what we got here. We got water has been discovered on Mars. I like that. That's good thoughts. It's interesting. I don't mind if you guys put those. I'm moving this one here too. This orange one. Why not? So before I continue now with the tutorial, what parts of the tutorial right now? The one, your project, your assignment number one. Here's the question for you. Instead of doing another survey, what parts do you find it most challenging? Like, you guys are learning this stuff from me, and some of you have done the video tutorials. So put up there maybe a little sticky that tells me, what part do you find the most challenging about assignment number one, right? Let's spend a few minutes doing that before I continue. And I'll just make this one a little bigger. Shrunk, very good. Scope creep. Scope creep, that's. All right, so let's move that one a bit bigger. Scope creep is a problem, and it happens because from a planning perspective, you think it's easy, and then when you start doing, it becomes very apparent quickly that it's not easy, right? That although you may think it is, you might at the beginning you're like, what side scroller? I've done this kind of stuff before. It's totally easy to do. Why is Tom giving this? And then you start doing it, and then you realize it ain't easy. The devil's in the details, right? Like we always talk about. And I hate to use the same analogies, but unfortunately, or same anecdotes. There you go, Manpreet. You're good now. But at the end of the day, that's how it goes. We get to, There's stuff that stops you from being productive. So please pop up your thoughts. I want to talk about it really quickly and maybe address a strategy on how we can move forward with some of the stuff. Because this is the first assignment. We're gonna have other assignments that are gonna be very tough as well. And this is an opportunity for you to you know, put up your thoughts. I like pie. I like pie too, buddy. I'm not sure how that relates. So. So I'm gonna wait a little longer. So I know I see one person's put up coding, mostly understanding the flow of variables, physics, triggers. That takes up a lot of time for sure. I'm gonna kind of pull this back a little bit. Hopefully they're not gonna kill me on the real estate again. They're gonna say it's too big. It's too much real estate you're using for your board. You got to pay for it. Right. Just a few more minutes here so that we can break the ice with this one. By the way, I don't know about you guys, but I find this kind of stuff, especially any kind of online collaboration, this kind of stuff is really good, especially when it's anonymous, because I don't know who's putting those things up. I can't trace it. It's your thoughts. It's like writing stuff on the board, but I can't see who it is. So please add your own thoughts up there. I really want to know. I'm going to give it another few minutes because so far I've got nothing. I've got one guy that said, oh wait, scope creep. There's two, scope creep. And the other one is understanding how to code. Objects running out of the map. Okay, how do we stop? So borders, basically understanding how to do boundaries, setting up boundaries. There we go. Setting up boundaries, the problem with that is there's a couple of ways we can do that. We've talked about one way of doing it, right? The one way is for me to detect where on the board your player or your enemies are, and then I wish I was struggling more so I can give better feedback. That's a good one. I like that one. It means I'm not struggling is what that's saying, right? Good, good, good. Some people are struggling because and I said Seki, it's good. Some people are struggling because they haven't done the work. And when I talk to some people, I'm like, did you do the work? Did you actually go and do your tutorial? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, but you're struggling, right? And they're like, yeah, but I don't have enough. It's a long tutorial. It's really long to do with the space shooter tutorial. Yes, it is. But like I just gave you this one. So should I put it in a lab for you guys to finish this one? This other one that you have to do for stuff. I'm going to go back and I'll repeat myself again that you need to do this as homework because, you know, to learn how to do a platformer, there's some really good pointers in there and some things that are weird as well. When you do it the first time, you'll be like, what the hell? How come it works like this from a physics perspective, right? Let's see, adding a life cannon. We're going to talk about some of this right now. AI and shot firing, okay? So some of that is addressed in the space shooter, objects running out of the map, particle physics. Particle physics, I would try and avoid a little bit right now, only because it's out of scope of our assignment. It's nice to have, but if you don't understand it, we're going to get to it. How to create particle physics and all that. It's really about creating an emitter, right? That's what particles do. They create a place where we have an emitter. It emits the particles at a certain rate, and then it's gone, right? That's so it creates that little explosion effect, right? Enemy AI is not covered in the tutorial. It's true, it's not covered. We have to kind of remember our enemy AI right now is very basic. It's so basic that all we do is avoid, and it's random, right? So if you do what I do in the tutorial, my tutorial where I show you how I randomly reset my my pieces around, that's fine. I think you'll be okay with that one, right? I think if you try and make it really smart AI, then I think you're going to spend a lot of time, and you're gonna kind of write yourself into a corner. Instantiating a firing object from an enemy object and translation of and so on. Yeah, same kind of things. We'll talk about some of that maybe over today and tomorrow. The reason why I'm asking this kind of stuff for people, why am I asking for feedback, is because this way I can really address it with you. If you have a problem with some of this stuff, then maybe over the next day or so I'll talk about it. Right, so that way, you know, it might clear up some of the problems you might have. Okay. Can we use a spawn in the space shooter as AI? Yeah, you could, but that's when we talk about AI. That is what we're doing, right? When I reset, that is kind of like how the AI. When I say artificial intelligence for your enemies, how are my clouds in the game I'm making with you guys? How is that AI? Well, it is. It's random. It's not great AI. It's not really intelligent, right? Too much. It's random, but they still come at you, right? Yeah. So if you just use random spawning for now, that's okay. That does enough. You know, if you want to make it more complex because you want to make a specific kind of game, that's up to you as well, and I'm totally cool with that. But I'm not going to force you to. Okay, I'm not going to force you to. Okay, relating different script components. Okay, we can talk about that a little bit too. Sanctioning fire. I think I've got most of it. Can we spawn a space shooter? Okay, and scope creep. I think I've got most of it there. Okay, will visuals affect grade? Visuals affect grade? Yeah, they will a little bit. I mean, if it's really poor, right? I mean, it's part of your UI. When I look at your user interface, if it's really ugly, then yeah, you'll be affected a little bit. But if it's, I mean, remember, we're not artists here in this room. If you reuse stuff from other people, if you use some asset libraries, different links I've given you for some of that, that's okay. But if it's really ugly, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about makes no sense ugly, right? Or if you use you piece graphics together that have no bearing on the on the type of game you're making. Like, for example, you're making a space game. You make a side-scrolling space game, but you have sandwiches that are floating in space, right? I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of a critical, decision mark. It depends on what you're making, right? And the answer is it really depends. Like, some people have handed in stuff, and I look at it and I'm like, that makes no sense. How can this coin be floating underwater? Doesn't make any sense. But if depending on who you describe it, you might say something like this. It's pirate treasure, right? It's pirate treasure because we've seen coins in different places that make no sense. If it's a coin, if it's a pickup somehow, right? But sometimes you might see something that it really doesn't flow with the game, and that's where you lose a little bit marks. Or if you haven't really taken care of the graphics. Like, for example, if the graphics from a ping perspective, they're not transparent, so you see a block. It looks like a big square that's kind of floating around, and you don't do that. A little bit of pre-work for your graphics, a minor amount. We're talking about to fix them up. Then the thing that happens for you is that you might be affected by some bad marks when it comes to UI. All right, so let's move on. I think we've kind of covered this more than we should. I'll leave that up for you guys if you guys want to continue adding other things. But let's get to the heart of. Let's go back to the kind of the game that I had modeled my game after, and eventually I'll share this with you online. So I'm going to kind of pull up. Sorry, I'm going to pull up Unity here, and I'm going to pull up the male pilot game that's kind of closer to where I want to go with this. With what we're doing today, right? So if you notice, there's lives and score in the game that I was modeling after, and if I press play here, I get an engine sound, right, with some explosions. Right? Now, if you notice, the explosion's an animation. It's not a particle effect, right? It instantiates and then disappears. Right? There's a coin that makes no sense, right? Coin that's in the middle of the, but he's picking up points, right? So maybe in this particular context, it's okay. Right? I'm at -1 already. So this is where the game would shift. I would have the game would be over here. So that's where we want to go today. And what we want to try and talk about is colliders, and we want to also talk about things like 2D rigid body and so on that you need for some of your colliders to work. Okay, so we'll talk about that today. That's where I'm going to be focusing on. If I can get to it, I'd like to talk about the score and the lives and all that stuff, and your heads-up display by tomorrow. That's where I'd like to go. I'm seeing people laugh, which means they've added stuff on concept board, which is funny. But I didn't see anything, so I don't know. Anyway, so like I said, we'll kind of break it down between those two things. So today I want to focus on colliders. All right, because that's just a day right there. How do I make colliders? Because colliders are the meat and bones of how you make things go. If you can collide with an object, I can carry a score. I can subtract from its score. I can add to it. I can kill its life. I can make it disappear and put it back. There's all kinds of stuff I can do with a proper collider. So we got to talk about that today. And then if we can get to it, I'd like to talk about scoring. If we'll start scoring today and then finish it by tomorrow, right? Tomorrow also, or the next day, day 2, we'll talk about like our assignment number 2, which is going to have details just like assignment number 1 to make your own little platformer, right? How do I make a platformer? What am I looking for in a platformer? And so on, right? So let's get to it without further ado. So I'm going to close this one down. And we'll open up the one that we're working on together. And for those people who are following online, it's going to be COMP305 male pilot demo. Section 1 is for our other folks in section 1, right? So let's go to this one. And by the way, we're into week 4, so be prepared for some kind of surprise quizzes here and there, right? I might put together a surprise quiz at some point in the future, like this week, tomorrow, day 2, or perchance next week. And the quiz will be worth like 5% of your mark, and it'll go over things like what are the 3 things that are part of every polygon in a 3-dimensional world: faces, edges, and vertices, right? I'll ask that question. I'm going to ask it. I've said it about 10 times, right? So if I don't ask that question on a quiz, it's just silly, right? It's going to come up, and it'll be like a 10-question quiz or something like that, worth 5% of your mark or something. And why? Because you need to know some kind of theory behind what we're doing. All right, so just be prepared for it. It'll be either this week or next week. I'll let you know. And if it's going to happen tomorrow or on Wednesday for you guys, then I'll send out a notification letting you know ahead of time. I'll say, by the way, Wednesday we're going to do a quiz. Be prepared for that in first part of our lecture. Okay. Worst case, it's going to happen for the worst case in week 5, which is next week. So be prepared either this week or next week. There's going to be some kind of Q&A, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to really reduce the amount of weight that the midterm exam will have, because that's like a pain in the ass, right? If it's like 25% from midterm, if I can take away from that a little bit and give you a chance to get a little higher, I'd like to try and get you to do that, right? And that's the reason, not because I want to make your life difficult. All right, let's go to scenes. I'm going to double click on main, and what do we have so far? So I'm going to click on it, and again, I got some basic movement. This is good, right? Very similar to what we have in the other game. In fact, I like some of the things that we've done here, maybe a little better, right? Now, there's no collisions. So, and why? Well, because we have to put colliders on different things. Let's add the collider just to be fun, right? Let's start by adding the collider on our prefabs. So we're going to go to prefab. Here's our cloud. And by the way, like I said before, let me bring this up on on GitHub. If you go to GitHub and you go to Centennial, and you're going to notice there's a COMP305 male pilot demo, this one, right? So if you can always pull it down from here if you're just starting to follow along, or you were unable to follow along before. Okay, let's go back. So I want to go to my prefab, and if you notice in my prefab, which is my cloud, I'm just going to pull this bigger for a second. We'll make this screen a little smaller, just so you can see. I've got a couple of things here, right? Already, I've got my script, right, for my prefab, my cloud controller, with a speed, a drift, and a boundary. But this is a great way of doing boundaries. I know people asked about it on the concept board there. Setting up a boundary like this and saying, if you go beyond, the location of this object, remember the location is dictated by the central focal point of the object right now. If the location of this object goes beyond a certain point, and then you can check to see if that happens, you can stop it from moving there, or you can do other things. So we're going to get into that. That's one way of stopping things from leaving the boundary. Order and layer we talked about as a review last week. It's where it sits as you it's the order of the stacking order, right, of how objects appear in 2D on your screen. So if I was going to go back here, because I know people ask me about this, if I was to look at it from a 2D perspective, you can tell, right? You can tell that if I rotate around, it's perfectly flat, right? If I look at it from the side, there is no width or depth in this game at all, right? And that might confuse some people. They might be like, wow, how's that working, right? When we're using this order and layer, that's what basically creates the stacking order from a viewability perspective on the 2D plane that we're looking at right now, right? That's what it does. So please remember, this is kind of an important piece, a property, right? But I want things to collide. And the first thing, I'm going to kind of minimize these things or collapse them a little bit. And I want to add another component. Actually, I want to add two. Physics 2D. I want to go to Physics 2D and add in a rigid body 2D. You're going to say, what do I need rigid body 2D for? If you're only doing, there's no physics. Just put it in for a second, right? And I'm going to talk about this in a second, right? And then I want you to also add in, if I go to Physics 2D, right? Do you see that there's different kinds of colliders, right? This is what you need too. Now, what would be really good to work with my clouds? Should I use a box collider for my cloud? Well, you could, right? But we talked about this in other classes, and if I was going to go and let's use concept board, because I can draw in concept board too. I'm going to go back to concept board. Maybe they'll allow me to. Let me just refresh and see what happens if they say you've gone beyond. No, that's good. I'm going to keep this board going, right? So I'm going to go back for a second, and I'm going to start drawing a couple of objects, right? So let's go. If I draw a shape, and here's a rectangle, I'm just going to pull the board over a little bit, okay, when I do this. So just don't be afraid. I'm not going to wipe away what you put in there. I'm just going to put it on the side here, way over here, right? And up here, I'm going to draw a rectangle. So this represents our cloud, right? Here's our cloud. If I use a cloud as a rectangle, right? And if I have my player, who's also a rectangle, here's my rectangle player, right? And if this is my cloud has rounded edges, right? If I move my player, as an example, and it kind of intersects with my cloud like this, that's a collision. Because I've got a block boundary, a rectangular boundary that makes my, that makes a collision properly with my player. Okay. What the hell am I talking about? Well, you can't tell until I actually put some pictures into it. So let's get rid of this, because some people don't understand what I'm saying, right? And let's add in some images, right? So we're going to insert in here. That's not the right thing to do. Now I'm trying to remember how to do it. Who knows how to put an image again? Is it under insert? Probably. Maybe it's a drag and drop.
Yeah, paste or paste.
I'm just going to go to what I want to do is I want to go to my desktop I want to get the actual images to show you guys. You see what I'm saying? So that way we don't have any discrepancy with what we're talking about. So you understand what I'm saying, right? 100%. So let me just go in here, go to assets, and I'm going to go to sprites. And there we go. So I got my cloud. Let's see if I can pull that in. There we go. And I've got my plane. Let's pull this in. Right, okay. This is good. I'm going to minimize this for a second. So here's my cloud and my plane. Yeah, that's good. Let's see if I can. I guess I got to do one of these. Okay, good. I'll move this over here. So there's the bounding box for the cloud, right? And let me just make this a little bigger for you guys so you guys can see a little bit more of it. There we go. So it's more visible. So here's my plane. Now, ooh, that's not what I wanted to do. Doesn't matter. Let's just move it over here. So let's say, the question is there a collision right here? The answer is no. There's no collision right here, right? What about here? Visually, is there a collision right there? The answer is no. But what about what it really is? Yes. Because even though visually it's not a collision, right? Look how it actually collides, right? So this is why a box collider may not be the best choice for either one or the other. Don't know yet which I'm going to use. that's one of the colliders I can use. The other one that I could use is if I don't use a rectangle, and if I make the rectangle the same size as my screen, let's say I make it an ellipse. So if I was to make it an ellipse here, let's draw the ellipse. This is better, right? Because I can draw an ellipse that kind of encompasses my cloud object approximately, right? So imagine if I've got my cloud and I've kind of got this out, and then what if I did the same thing for my plane, right? So I'm going to kind of draw the same thing for my plane, put this around my plane approximately. So that's a little better. There's no visual collision and there's no physical collision, right? With an ellipse. That's possible as well. The problem is it won't be an ellipse, it'll be a circle, right? That's the one I have. Let's go back to Unity for a second. I'll show you this, right? So here's Unity, and if I go add physics 2D, and if I want to add a collider, there's a circle collider, there's a box collider, there's an edge collider, right? So there's different kinds of colliders, and there's also a polygon collider. What I don't want to do, and I want to avoid, is a collider that's too complex. Why? Why do I want to avoid a really complex collider? What for? Performance, right? I know it's common sense. You said it. People won't realize what that is, because every time I create a collider, right, I have to. It calculates. The physics engine calculates your bounding boxes. So if I have 3 clouds that are instantiated, or in your case, you're making bullets, right, and the bullets are just firing off, right? These bullets are going to have some kind of bounding box. If it's a complex bounding box, like a polygon, right, it's going to be very complex. So be careful. It will slow down your game. And sure, for us here on a desktop, you may not see a difference, but you'll definitely see it if you're on mobile, 100%. Okay. So there's a couple of things we can do here. Let's try some. Let's try on our prefab, on our cloud. Let's try a polygon collider. That's the most complex collider we can use, right? So I've added a polygon collider on my prefab. Now, the way to see that, of course, is on the cloud itself, right? There isn't a cloud here. I'm just going to drag, for now, I'm just going to drag and drop this cloud and put it as a game object so you can see what the prefab will look like, right? And this as the collider itself. Let's zoom in here so you can see what I'm talking about. You see what I'm saying? That's very nice, right? In terms of how it's going to collide. And I only have one of them on the screen, which is probably going to be okay. What if, though, I have 30 clouds, right? This is a lot of complexity here, right? It's a lot of complexity because there's a lot of edges and points, and there's a lot of vertices. If you notice, they're trying to make it so that it is a this physics object, again, is very complex, right? So how do I make it a little simpler? I'm just presenting these to you because you might say, oh yeah, a polygon collider makes the most sense. It does, but it also kills you, right? So let me just remove my component for a second, because there's right now there's no colliders. Put another one back. Let's try a couple other ones. I'm going to go to physics 2D, and I'm going to go to box collider. Well, obviously that's bad, right? That's bad because, like we said before, that there has to be some kind of better solution. If you look here on the right, take a look on the right. There is this little box that says Edit Collider, right? Edit Collider. What it allows me to do is it gives me these little handles, and what I can do is kind of change the shape. So it's not a square, it's a rectangle. Like really is a rectangle. I can change how much or how little I want to collide, and here's the offset and the size of my collider. This is good. This is good control for me, right? But this doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's not use that. Let's try the next one, which would be a circle collider. There's my circle. I'm going to edit my circle, and I've got these points. And now, if you want it to be so that you can change the size, so it's pretty much as close as possible, right? And you can see that there is an offset as well. If I actually click on this, these controls still work for my collider up here, right? So I can move this, the whole object right around, so you can see it. It only changes for what I'm looking at, right? So it's not the best because you see a lot of area here. If I was trying to collide with this part of the object, this wouldn't make any sense. Even this part, which means there's an area here. Take a look at the island. Imagine my island is my player, Is there a collision there? Visually, no, but there would be, right? So this collider makes no sense to me. Any suggestions? You guys are playing with the colliders, I'm sure, as I speak, right? So what would you recommend? Anybody have a recommendation? Huh? 2 colliders. Could do that, right? Be careful when you use 2 colliders. It messes you up physics-wise, right? Just saying, right? More calculations. Not a bad idea though. Sometimes we have to make a complex collider. We kind of make one out of 2 colliders. How about this one? How about edge collider? What the hell is that, right? Well, where is it? Offset is 0, right? And there it is. There's the edge collider, right? And how do I move that? Well, what you can do, which is kind of neat, is you can adjust the edge collider, right, any way you like. So that way you can adjust the actual collider, how it goes around your cloud. And you might say that's a lot of points, but does the plane ever have a chance to collide from the top? See, that's a point. That's a design point, right? Right there. Just make this a little bit different. So I could do something like this. This isn't a bad solution. Some people may have seen this before. But the reason why is if I did one of those, it doesn't quite encompass the whole thing. It's not as complex, right, as the other piece as well. This might be a not bad solution. In fact, you can almost put, if you draw this out a little bit, if you wanted to really, I could make it pretty good, right? Like to draw this thing around, you know, my shape, right? As much, if you notice how I'm doing it, where the point is, where this little grabby point is, I can go somewhere in the middle and then add another grabby point, right? Just by moving in the middle, right? So I can add more points. And I can always move these points around until I'm pretty good, right? Here's another grabby point. And all I'm using the grabby points for is so that way it's easier for me to transform my collider as much as possible so that it comes together more accurately. Still more complex than a box collider, be warned, it is. I'm not going to tell you that it's not as complex, it totally is. So I'm just put this over here and then put a point in the middle and drag it down. And same thing over here and put a point in the middle and drag it up. As you can see, slowly, I'm getting close to where I want to be, right, until they connect. What do you think? It's not bad. There's some stuff I can still do to it. I can still make it more accurate, right, by moving it around a little bit. And there's areas here that don't make any sense, like this area here. There's still quite a bit of a area. But the more points I add to it, remember, the more complex I make it. So we got to be very careful. That's good enough for me. Would you agree? So it's not quite a box collider. It's not quite a another type of collider. It's an edge collider. Here's what I want to do now that I've got this collider going, right? Notice that I'm doing it on this instantiated object, right? Here's my prefab. I'm not doing it on the prefab. Why? Can't see this prefab on my scene, right? I've got to drag this object here to play with it first. So how do I make it so that the prefab is affected? Any ideas? There's the apply button over here, right? If I click the apply button, what it does is it applies this back to the prefab. So now I have my edge collider here, right? Let's go back to this one though to make sure that it's good, right? So I've got here's my collider and so on. I'm going to leave it as is, but I'm going to get rid of this thing. I'm going to just kind of delete this one, right? Just to make sure. So here's my cloud. I see that my cloud prefab has it, but look how I can't edit it. See, there's not an edit option here. Here's rigid body. I can do stuff with that one, but I can't edit this one, right? Why? It's a prefab. So let's get rid of this one. So I'm going to right click and delete. Here it is, my collider, and I'm going to run the game as is, no code. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, here's my clouds. Oh, what's going on there? See what happened? Let's just give it a little bit more space so you can see. Sometimes you get some really weird ass effects, right? Okay. And let's put it on the scene side so you can see what's going on here when I kind of come up here. Right? So they spawn together, and do they collide with each other? Can they collide with each other? The answer is yeah, they can, right? So you got to be careful. Right now, their 2D physics is such that they're coming down pretty fast and furious too. In fact, something's happening here with our rigid body 2D, right? Our rigid body 2D is giving us a mass and a gravity scale of 1, right? We don't want to. And it looks like the clouds are coming down like really much faster than before because of this. Let me stop this and go over here for a second. So let's turn gravity to 0. Will it allow me to put this gravity to 0? The answer is yeah. How about this? Mass of 0. Would that be allowed? No, it will not, right? Angular drag. If I put that 0, come on, I can put that, and the answer is yeah. I don't need any of these gravitational effects, because remember, I'm playing a 2D game with no physics. When we do our platformer, this makes sense, right? For the physics on the rigid body 2D to take effect. But for us right now, for our clouds, it shouldn't work. So we have to turn these little effects down. We need both. We need both the rigid body 2D and the edge collider or some other collider 2D in order for us to have collisions. Okay? Right, let me try and start this again and see what the difference is now. Now you see the difference? Slow again. Right? Now, here's sometimes what you might see is sometimes what happens is the clouds might bounce off each other. So how do we stop that from happening? We change this from the way it is right now, right, to is trigger. We want to click on is trigger. Is trigger is good because that means it'll collide as a trigger as opposed to be like as a physics body. It's important to put that on. So yes.
If I wanted them to bounce off each other consistently, how would I do that?
You definitely make a rigid body 2D, increase their mass and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about angular drag, but you might want to put angular drag 0, like closer to that. And then if you put is kinematic, right? Sometimes what happens is it adds in additional rotation, all that kind of stuff. But you still would want to use and I'm talking about just without code, it would start colliding on their own, right? So be careful when you do that. We don't want the clouds to collide, right now with anything. In fact, we don't want anything to physically collide from a physics perspective with anything else. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you get some weird ass effects, like the cloud colliding with the ocean, or the cloud colliding with the island, and all that kind of stuff. You don't want that to happen. Okay, so let me zoom back in here for a second so we can see what I'm talking about. So I guess this is the first thing I want to do. So I've changed the clouds. I've made them a trigger, and when I run this now, as you see, and again, there's no code so far. There's no effect. Right now, our code for the quote unquote AI is working nice. You got some fast moving clouds, and you got some slow moving clouds. Okay, so they're not all fast moving because they're not bouncing into each other or anything like that. Okay, that's number one. This pattern is what we're going to use for our plane as well. Let's do the plane next. All right, so we're going to put the colliders on, and then we're actually going to script things out, and we're going to do that. We're going to do the script after the break. All right, so let's go to the player, and again, I'm going to zoom in on the player on the screen here so we can see him. The good thing is he is actually not a prefab, so we can actually see our player object a little cleaner. And we're going to talk about there's some idiosyncrasies here for the player that's a little bit different than what we had for the cloud. Can anyone see what the challenge would be for the player that's different than the cloud? Anybody have an idea? John, what do you think is different than the cloud, and the player? The cloud and the player. What's different?
You're controlling it in the cloud.
It's controlled by itself, but that's okay. That's one difference. What else? That's not the thing that'll change our collision issue. What? The size is smaller, all right. But what else do you see? What do you see physically? Remember, there's two things we're seeing. There's two parts. Who said shadow? There's two parts here that are issues. One is physical collision, actual collision, right? So the game collision and what we see on the screen as players. You don't want to make a game where the physical collision is happening, right? Like the visual collision is not happening, but somehow in the game it's happening. That's really a very frustrating game to play, right? You're like, wait, I didn't get hit. How come I'm losing a point, right? But actually on the game, the way the program has made it is like, remember those two rectangles like I showed you before, they're intersecting. It doesn't matter about the visual collision. So our problem here for the plane is you got a shadow. Now luckily, the shadow is below the plane, right? The nose of the plane is really the only piece we need to worry about. Well, there's a bit over here too, and because we can also collide with the cloud from the side, right? If we're not careful, we won't be able to hit the cloud from behind, so we don't have to worry about the back of the plane because we're only seeing, you know, things coming out the plane, right? Or maybe from the side, this left side or right side. But the shadow is definitely in a real world scenario. If the plane was moving in all directions, the shadow would have to be ignored. So this is where, if I was to put a rectangular collider, let's add that in. First again, rigid body 2D. I'm going to set all the values here for rigid body 2D to 0. So mass of 0. It's going to go back to 0, 0, 0, 1, like very little. 0 angular drag and 0 gravity scale. Right. Here's another thing. Sometimes it says never sleep. That's really useful if we're actually playing with actual 2D physics, which we're not. Different kinds of collisions, discrete and continuous collisions, right? We'll talk about the difference between those in a bit. Okay, let's minimize this and add another component, just like we did last time, which is a collider. If I was to add a box collider to the plane, and if I was to go into edit mode, can I do the same things with the plane that I could with the edge? No, right? So some people may think, well, if I can modify the edge, it's kind of like a box, right? But it's not that bad. Like, look, if I bring this back down to here, and this edge over to here, I mean, it's kind of square. It's 65 by 65. I could make it so that it's pretty good. I mean, there's a bit of a issue here and here, but I mean, you might say that this is good enough. For me, it's not good enough, guys. It's not good enough for me. I'd be if I had a player like this and they were going to go edge to edge, and somehow I saw a visual collision but it didn't happen, I'd be like, or I didn't see a visual collision and it actually happened and I lost a life, I'd be like, no way, that sucks. That game sucks. Right? I'd say that right away, right? So that's why I'm telling you, you have to kind of make some design choices here. So I don't think this is a good collider again for the plane. Let's add another kind, right? So physics 2D, and again, edge collider might be the one way to go. Let's try this time. Let's be very specific about our plane and try a polygon and see what the problems are going to be there. See, that's a problem. But if we edit it, this is where we can get into some editing here. This is the other option for our good collider. You can move the edges just like we did with the edge collider, right? And even though it's a polygon type collider, right, we can see that you can move the edges so that it ignores, if you're careful, and again, this is like by eye here, right? So I'm not really zooming in too much, but I could, right? Let's move this up a little bit. And what you want to do is get as close to the plane shape as possible. Even with the automatic, like Unity's pretty good at estimating where the collider should be. See, I'm adding a polygon there. Remember, I'd rather have my polygon on my plane than my polygon on all the other objects. Like I only have one object to worry about with a heavy-duty polygon. You can also remove them by these objects here as well. You don't have to have extra points here if you don't want them. Let's try and make this a little bit sharper here. So you guys do this while I'm doing it, please, so that you get some practice doing the collider, right? But you want to try and get as close to the wing as possible. I just want to show you the difference between a polygon collider and an edge collider. By the way, I could have put only one edge, like on my clouds, or two edges. I can do whatever I want. That's the beauty of this thing, and it's much nicer this way than when we for people who are taking the web game programming, right, course with me. You're going to notice there's other ways of doing it other than a collider. What's another way we could do it? If I was going to have no colliders in the plane whatsoever, how could I create a collision effect right, through code. Anybody have any idea? I don't need physics, right? So what's another way I could do it? Position. I could say the distance. If I'm less than half the height of both of my objects, half the width of both of my objects, more or less I have a collision, right? So it'd be very close. You would almost not need this kind of collider, but this is actually better because you can actually draw and use some, even if you're not a great artist, it doesn't matter because it gets pretty close. I mean, it won't be accurate, obviously. My collider isn't going to be exactly the same on both sides, but it'll be close enough. Who's got something like this? No. I'm just gonna make it. I'm trying to make it even. Okay. So see, I'm ignoring the shadow, like it doesn't exist. Like I'm not looking at the shadow at all because it makes sense, right? I'm not gonna. This is where someone asked, you know, from a UI perspective, when I do my collider, as an example, you know, what if the UI sucks, right? Well, if I see a sucky game that I collide from nothing, then you know what, I'm gonna give you a. You're gonna lose marks, right? If it's a really bad thing, if it doesn't work, right? But I mean, I'm showing you what to do, right? This is what I would do if I was you. If I was gonna be really specific. Again, from a cost perspective, a polygon collider in a 2D space is the heaviest in terms of calculations, right? That's okay because we're doing it on our main object, which is good. I'm going to save my scene here, right? Let's just finish off the colliders. We're not going to do one for the ocean because we don't need one, right? The ocean is not going to collide with anything. Oh, wait, I forgot one more thing with player. Player is also a trigger. Okay. Put on your trigger. All right, now the island. Let's do the same thing for the island. I'm going to add two things. A physics 2D rigid body, right, which I'm going to make it zero. I'm going to zero it out in our particular case, not a minus, 0. And I'm going to do the same thing for my collider. Now, the island is a little bit different than, am I doing the ocean? What did I say? Don't do it on the ocean. I'm putting it on the ocean. I meant to do that on the island. Sorry, let's do that again. It's good. You're seeing it a bunch of times, so you can't say you haven't seen it enough times. Okay, so here's my physics 2D, rigid body 2D. Make these all zeros. Because you don't need them, right? What was that? No. No way. That's okay. I can always drag and drop. That's bad. That'd be really bad if I remove the wrong thing, right? Let's put that script back. Oh. Speed 5. Save. Sorry. Okay. Let's not touch my ocean, okay? Let's do my island. Here's my island. It's zeros. And I want to add another component. First of all, let's zoom in. Oops. Let's zoom in to my island so you can see it in its entirety here. Now, I'm taking advantage of Unity here. When I zoom in like this and I'm using the Unity's tools, you need to do this, guys, right? Don't be lazy. There's some really good things you can do with Unity, you know, that are built in. Let's add a component, physics 2D component, and this time, let's do a couple some other tests. Box collider, no. How about, and again, it's very similar to the cloud, right? Could I add an edge collider? Maybe. And let's see that edge collider. It's right here. And again, I want to show you what it looks like. All I'm doing is pulling these things away, and I'm creating my my edges by pulling this object where I want it to be. I remember that the island is very similar to the it's very similar to the cloud in that the bottom of the island is going to be the one that the player is going to be colliding with, and not necessarily any other part, right? Chances are maybe the sides too. The other thing you do is you can put more than one collider on, like our friend said, right? What if you put more than one edge collider on? You could do that too, right? That's not unusual. One on the bottom, one on the top, right? And if they're different edge colliders, there's an advantage of putting more than one edge collider in that it's not a general collision. We're going to see this more on the platformer. Like imagine if someone jumps on your head, you want to know the difference between someone jumping on your head as opposed to someone hitting you from the front or the back, right? So you can do that with edge colliders a little bit nicer, right? There we go. So again, the technique is just draw it a little bit further out, and then as you pull, you can just pull these things apart, and you can kind of sculpt out what the collider is going to look like as close as you can get without costing us too much. Again, a little bit heavier than another type of collider, not quite as bad as a polygon collider, and that's why we do it. And as long as they meet, we're good. Pretty good. Yeah. So anywhere, if I go anywhere in the middle between 2 points, I can add another point. That's why I'm doing it for those people who can't see. Again, is it perfect? Absolutely not. I mean, I could spend some more time, be less lazy, and add some more points. But then the more points you add, the more calculations. Okay, good. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for my island, right? And again, I want to make it a trigger. Okay, so I've got my island. Here's my collider. I've got my player. Here's my collider for my player. Right? It's actually a polygon collider in this particular case. And I've got my collider for my my cloud, but remember we can't see it because it's a prefab. But we know that it's a trigger. Here's something else. You notice there's another area here before we stop for a break. There's another area here that shows material, right? You can create a physic material. And the physic material, what it'll do is it can change the way the collisions work in 2D or 3D. So when I create a material, it's a different kind of material. If I click on this thing, for example, I can create a new physic material. And what it'll do is it'll take care of things like bounce, the way it's elastic or not, those kind of things. I can add different materials like this. In a 2D world, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Sometimes we put them in to show elasticity or other kinds of effects. Okay, so notice that there is a space for that. Okay, any questions around this? So we draw or we select the right collider, and we also need a rigid body 2D. Those are things on the inspector we're doing, and within the scene. There isn't any actual physical things we're doing from a scripting perspective. Now, just to keep consistent with what we've been doing so far, while you guys are on break, which I'm going to stop this now, I'll kind of upload this and all the stuff we've just done on GitHub, so you can get all these little changes just in case you didn't get it. In Unity, if you use Unity 5, you'll be able to download it, and you'll get my colliders. Okay? So let's just stop for now and take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back after that.